The story begins with the protagonist coughing violently in an alley, blood staining her hands. Weeping, she laments her fate, recalling how her life has spiraled into despair because of a certain man. As she struggles to stay steady, memories flood her mind. At 16, her mother was falsely accused and took her own life. At 19, she was raped and forced into working as a bar waitress under the name Rita instead of living as a noblewoman. Now, at 23, she is dying of a lung disease, with no money and no hope. A noblewoman, Bertha Albert Hart, approaches her and speaks shocking words. She envies the protagonist's limited time, wishing she too could die without effort. The protagonist, bewildered by Bertha's twisted perspective, assumes she is merely mocking her suffering. But with a desperate will to survive, she seeks out a man who offers her an irresistible deal. Her diseased body will be exchanged for the healthy one that Bertha wishes to discard. She agrees without hesitation. However, after the switch, something dark awakens within her, something no one warned her about. And from that moment, her fate takes a turn she never saw coming. After the switch, the protagonist stood before a mirror, examining her new body. She scoffed at Bertha's foolishness but admitted she had a good physique. With a smirk, she thanked Bertha for the exchange. She saw Vita as weak and cowardly but acknowledged the physical advantage of her new body. As she examined herself, she wondered if Vita had died in the process. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Ian, the Albert Hart household's butler. Unfamiliar with him, Rita played along as Vita. Ian seemed relieved at her improved mood but grew concerned when he noticed cuts on her wrists. He reminded her of her engagement to Count Lawrence's family, which took Rita by surprise. She suspected this arrangement had contributed to Vita's unhappiness. Ian's behavior toward her was unsettling, his gaze and words carrying an inappropriate familiarity. He commented on her change in attitude and offered to help her relax, implying a physical relationship. Before she could process the situation, he lifted her onto the bed and initiated an intimate encounter. Rita was caught off guard, confused by Vita's past actions and relationship with Ian. As he continued, Rita found herself reacting involuntarily, further deepening her bewilderment about the situation she had inherited. Rita had struggled to process the situation as Ian had overstepped his boundaries, acting with inappropriate familiarity. She had found herself caught in a moment she hadn't anticipated, realizing the strange dynamic Vita had with the butler. Afterward, Ian had affectionately addressed her, speaking of the Lawrence family's future in politics and assuring her that she would eventually find contentment. He had then taken his leave, leaving Rita alone to reflect on the life Vita had lived. Later, as she had soaked in the bathtub, Rita had contemplated her new reality. She had no intention of tolerating such behavior but had understood the need to maintain appearances. Determined to adapt, she had risen from the water, covered herself with a robe, and prepared to take control of her new life. While walking through the castle garden, she had acknowledged the powerlessness of her past self. She had lived in a world where even malice had been a luxury she couldn't afford. Now, things were different. As she had crushed a rose in her hand, she had declared the old her dead. She was now Vita Albert, the sole daughter of a prestigious family. Taking command of her maids, Rita had reviewed her wardrobe, unimpressed with the selection. She had instructed a maid to write down her desired alterations, lower necklines, fewer embellishments, and simpler designs. The maids, shocked by her sudden change in taste, had hesitated but had followed her orders. She had then tasked them with gathering seasonal fashion pamphlets from the city. Summoning two maids, Jana and Sonia, Rita had led them to a room before excusing herself and quietly eavesdropping on their conversation. As expected, they had begun discussing household matters, revealing that Vita had despised her fiancé, and he, in turn, had shown little interest in her. They had speculated about his frequent visits and his close ties to Marquis Carter. The mention of the Carter family had struck a nerve. They had played a role in her past downfall, reducing her from Baron Wicker's daughter to a mere pub waitress. As the realization had settled in, Rita's expression had darkened, relishing the unexpected turn of events.